This is the Russ Belville Show, the winner of America's search for the next great progressive talk radio star. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Welcome back to the weekend. It's 6 after the hour.
MFer, I want more iced tea.
Nothing I can do about that, Bill. Hey, I'm Radical Russ, your red state refugee.
We're going to get our britches beat next year.
Yeah, we hope so, Mike Huckabee. Yeah, we're talking about the election results from Iowa and how well did the Democrats do versus the Republicans.
Blacks are gagging on the donkey, but not yet ready to swallow the elephant.
You know, I don't even know what that means. Welcome back to the show. Yeah, talking about the Iowa caucus results out there. We had a surprising win for Barack Obama, finished well in the lead with 38%, followed by John Edwards at 30%, Hillary Clinton at 29%. And, you know, the Clinton finish there is quite surprising given the name recognition and the political machine that the Clintons have built up. But, you know, I think this is a back run. She needs to run on her own policies and her own record. And that, I think, is another part of the problem. Hillary Clinton running on her own record. She, of course, voted for the authorization to use force in Iraq, a.k.a. the give George Bush the green light to invade bill. And she also voted for the Kyle Lieberman amendment there to declare Iran's Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. Yet another blank check for the Bushies to try to invade another Middle Eastern country. So Barack Obama's been hammering away on this, saying, you know, if you want to talk about Hillary Clinton's experience, remember that it was her experience that made her vote for the Iraq resolution and the Iran resolution. So this may be working against Hillary Clinton. Now, longtime listeners of the show will know that I've always had my problems with the Hillary Clinton campaign. I mean, the one issue for me that did it for me was when she co-sponsored that amendment to make it a crime to burn a flag. What? How could you be someone who is educated at Wellesley, a practicing attorney, someone who should have a pretty decent grasp of the First Amendment to the Constitution, saying that we have the right to freedom of speech and the right to protest our government? I want to ban flag burning. I mean, right there, that taught me everything I needed to know about Hillary Clinton, because I can't believe that she really believes that she really believes flag burning is a bad thing. I have to believe she did it as triangulation. And that's the curse of the Clintons. Triangulation. Always trying to pander to the middle. When we've seen from the Republican Party nothing but sticking to the right. See, that's how the Republicans had been so successful over the past 26 years or so, is by finding their principles and standing up for them and sticking to them. Whereas the Democrats have constantly been trying to play a game of retail marketing. Like, let's check the polls, and whatever most of the people thinks is good, that's what we'll go with. Most of the people think this, therefore that's what we'll say. And that just leads to, you know, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. That's the old saying. Well, that's what happened to the Democratic Party. I think Bill Clinton left the Democratic Party in worse shape than before he became president. Now, work with me on this one. Let me explain. You know, Bill Clinton was a pretty successful president as far as economics go and other measurements of presidencies, you know, his peace accords and fighting in Kosovo and so on. The problem, though, is that Bill Clinton's success led the Democrats to believe that the DLC way, the Democratic Leadership Council's way of campaigning, by triangulating and pushing toward the center and being Republican light, because Bill Clinton was so successful, that made them believe that that was the proper way to campaign. When that is not exactly why Bill Clinton was so popular. Part of what made Bill Clinton so popular is he's one of those once in a lifetime, once in a generation type of politicians who has that rare combination of charisma and intelligence. You know, someone who just, you know, lights up a room when he walks into it. Even if you hate the guy, you leave liking the guy, right? He's got that kind of charisma. So he's kind of an exception to the rule, if you will. So his success was more predicated on his personal characteristics, as well as the entrance of Ross Perot in the race back in 1992, who helped to split the conservative vote. So the election of Bill Clinton was no endorsement of these DLC centrist types of policies. It was an exception. But then the DLC and all the Democrats started to believe that, well, if Bill Clinton did it that way, that's the way I should do it. And that's what's led us to the debacle we're in now. That's what's led us to 2000 and Al Gore running away from the Clinton record and running away and trying to cast himself into more of a centrist light, picking a guy like Joe Lieberman to be his vice president. And it just scared away all the true Democrats. And that's the problem I've got with Hillary Clinton. Now, on the Barack Obama side, I like a lot about Barack Obama as well. However, Barack sounds a little bit more like this, again, DLC centrist type of a guy. When he's talking about his health care plans, he keeps talking about bringing the insurance companies and the health care providers to the table to help to determine how to fix the health care problem. That's kind of like bringing in the fox to ask you how you should upgrade the security at the hen house. The problem is the insurance companies, Barack. That's the problem. You don't bring those guys in to try to fix it. We need to eliminate those guys. There is no reason we should have an adversarial company, a corporation, in between the American people and their doctors. And that's what we've got right now. And Barack Obama, it looks to me like he's standing up for more of the same. Bring them to the table so that they can make it just a little better. Not so much better that it would hurt their multi-billion-dollar profits. Just a little bit better. Now, how does this work out for John Edwards now? John Edwards finishes a surprising second, beating Hillary Clinton by the slimmest of margins, and now he's on his way toward the New Hampshire primaries and toward South Carolina. John Edwards has surprised me a lot in the past few weeks with his recent comments about the corporatism that is run amok in this country, big business interests that are entrenched in our political system, and he's been talking the talk about progressive populism, which I'm really glad to hear. I'm glad to hear someone other than just Dennis Kucinich mouthing these statements. But I wonder how sincere that John Edwards might be. Is this coming from the son of a mill worker who grew up poor, or is this coming from the multi-million-dollar trial lawyer who's trying to find an angle to fight against Clinton and Obama? We'll see how this shakes out as we round the corner here to New Hampshire. Now, on the other side, when we look at the Republican side, oh boy, looking at the Republican side, this is very entertaining to me to see Mike Huckabee winning the Iowa caucuses by a large margin. Reports out of Iowa tell us that there was a large evangelical support where the GOP base, the church folks, got out of their megachurches and got all their people to the caucuses to pick Mike Huckabee. And boy, this is Schadenfreude at its best. You know, Schadenfreude, the German word for taking delight in other people's displeasure. You know, since the days of Ronald Reagan, the right wing, the GOP, has been courting this evangelical base. Right? We got all of your corporate neocons and your war hawks and all your traditional Republican types who've been literally using the right-wing evangelicals as their get-out-the-vote force. You know, they'd always mouth some sort of platitude toward, fighting against gay marriage or, fighting for family values. And then when the time comes, when push comes to shove, they don't care. These Republicans, if it's not about money, they don't care. Gay marriage, actually, they're probably for gay marriage. Imagine all those gay men having wedding receptions and having ceremonies. Imagine the money that would be spent there. But these business Republicans have been using the right-wingers, been using these evangelicals for so long to get out the vote. While they weren't looking, these right-wingers, these evangelicals got a taste of the power. They tasted the power in their numbers and said, well, if you business Republicans aren't going to do anything about the family values, we'll elect someone who will. And then we get Mr. Huckabee, Mr. Mike Huckabee, the former governor of Arkansas, who is, their chickens are coming home to roost, aren't they? Right? Now the Republicans don't know what to do. They are freaked out. They cannot believe that this religious guy, this right-wing evangelical, is got a chance at winning their nomination. And they're doing everything they can do to try to shut it down. I saw the comments from the head of the Republican National Committee the other day. They were asking him, I think it was on Fox News, and they were asking him about how the caucuses went and what he thought about the results. And he spoke, at length, 5 minutes or so, about the results and what they meant and the future of the Republican Party and et cetera, what the Democrats would do, et cetera, et cetera. Not once in a 5-minute talk from the head of the Republican National Committee did he ever say the words, Mike Huckabee. It's a little telling, isn't it? Yeah, they don't want to have anything to do with him. We'll see how that shakes out as we get through the rest of these primary states. Well, coming back after the break here, we want to talk about some of the other stories that have slipped underneath the radar while all of this politicking has been going on. So stay tuned for that. And of course, as always, we'll be having our Lunatic Fringe Awards. That's right, the first Lunatic Fringe Awards of 2008. I'm Radical Russ, your Red State refugee. Don't go nowhere. We'll be right back.
This is the Russ Belville Show, the winner of America's search for the next great progressive talk radio star.
Welcome back to the weekend, coming at you live and direct here from the Pacific Northwest. I'm Radical Russ Belville, your Red State refugee. Oh boy, we're having so much fun here. Lots of weather problems out here in the Pacific Northwest, been causing all sorts of havoc here in the studio. Nothing like technical difficulties on the beginning of a new year. Hooray for me. Anyway, welcome back to the show. I want to get some of the other news other than the Iowa caucus news. Of course, in sports this weekend, it is Wild Card weekend in the National Football League. Just about a half hour after my show concludes, the Washington Racial Slurs will be traveling up here to the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, to face off against the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are playing for their opportunity to lose once again at Lambeau Field to my mighty Green Bay Packers. Actually, I'm kind of hoping the Racial Slurs win. That would send either Tampa Bay or the Giants to Lambeau Field. And if Tampa Bay could win, that would be perfect, because I love it when a warm weather team comes to Lambeau. But this isn't a sports show. I just had to get that off my chest because, well, I'm a Packers fan. That's the way we are. As usual here on the show, we also want to keep our eye on the right wing. There's so many crazies out there on the lunatic fringe that we need to start paying attention.
The lunatic is on the grass.
Now it's time for our weekly roundup of the right wing's altered reality.
The lunatic is on the grass.
From the Guano Loco neocon chicken hawks to the hypocritical American Taliban and the cable news punditocracy, the Russ Belville Show presents the Lunatic Fringe Award, an award dedicated to the politician, pundit, or preacher who said the most ignorant, hateful, or bizarre quote of the week. It's our first Lunatic Fringe for 2008. Oh, I'm so excited. Let's get right to it. Starting off with our first nominee for the Lunatic Fringe Award, a perennial all-star, a member of the Hall of Fame. You love him, you can't get enough of him. Mr. Bill Falafel Boy O'Reilly. Yes, he's our first contestant today. You knew it had to be Bill, didn't you? Yeah, so Bill O'Reilly, when he's not out cruising the Home Depot shopping for loofahs, he also likes to write books. And by write books, I mean get out the crayon and the paper. Anyway, so Bill O'Reilly wrote this book for children. And it is America for Kids, or Kids Are Great Americans. I forget the title, and who cares anyway? I don't want to give him a plug. But Bill O'Reilly wrote this book for kids, talking about America and giving them kind of a lowdown on what it means to be a good American and the history of America and so on. And in this book, he writes a passage about how the Constitution gives us our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Constitution gives us the rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Yeah. So it turns out that Bill's readers, his children who read this book, actually know a little bit more about our historical documents than he does.
Mr. O'Reilly, I really enjoyed Kids Are Americans too, but in the first sentence of Chapter 3, you say the Constitution guarantees life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. Isn't that from the Declaration of Independence? Another excellent question, Courtney. The reason the Constitution was forged was to assure new American citizens the right to free life and access to pursue happiness in his or her own way. The Declaration was the statement, the Constitution the instrument.
Isn't that nice? A nice way to kind of spin your way out of it. The Declaration of Independence declared that we have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The Constitution is the instrument that enforces that. Yeah, all right, Bill. That's kind of shady reasoning if you ask me, but okay, we'll give you that one. So Bill can't be our winner for the Lunatic Fringe today. That's just not quite lunatic fringy enough. So let's turn to another one of our Hall of Famers. That's right, comedian Rush Limbaugh, who makes this frightening announcement.
I want to discuss with you my qualifications. The qualifications that I possess that suggest that it is I, El Rushbo, who can lead you through this difficult period.
That's it. Rush Limbaugh talking about how he would be a good nominee for President of the United States. Yeah, Rush's qualifications for President of the United States. What would that qualification be? Not serving in the military because you had a cyst on your butt and you got out of Vietnam with 5 deferments? Or would that be downing 30 Oxycontin a day through illegal doctor shopping? I wonder which one it could be. No, I'm afraid that's just not lunatic fringy enough for the award either, although it is kind of scary. So let's turn to our winner today. Our winner today is the head of, the driver, I guess, of the Straight Talk Express, the Maverick, so to speak, Mr. John McCain, the senator from Arizona who's running for president. And he was in a town hall meeting in New Hampshire when he had a New Hampshire resident asking him about our enduring presence in Iraq. And the questioner was wanting to know if the senator would support keeping our troops in Iraq for an extended period of time.
President Bush has talked about our staying in Iraq for 50 years.
Maybe 100.
We've been
in South Korea. We've been in Japan for 60 years. We've been in South Korea for 50 years or so. That'd be fine with me as long as Americans are not being injured or harmed or wounded or killed.
So, according to John McCain, he'd be fine with our troops being in Iraq for 100 years, so long as none of the troops were getting killed. 100 years in Iraq, so long as the troops are not getting killed. But if we go back just 6 weeks to the Charlie Rose show, when Charlie Rose asked the same question.
Do you think that this South Korea, is an analogy where Iraq might be, not in terms of their economic success, but in terms of an American presence over the next, say, 20, 25 years, that we will have a significant amount of troops there?
I don't think so.
Even if there are no casualties?
No, but I can see an American presence for a while. But eventually, I think, because of the nature of the society in Iraq and the religious aspects of it, that America eventually withdraws.
So John McCain, for turning your Straight Talk Express into the Flip-Flop Mobile, you are the winner of this week's Lunatic Fringe Award. I'm Radical Russ, your Red State refugee. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay tuned. When we come back around the hour, we'll talk about Utah. Yes, Utah.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Thank you. 35 after the hour. Welcome back to the show. Hey, looking around this North American continent today, man, are we having some weather. Up here in the Pacific Northwest, we got wind and rain just beating down our doors. Down in Southern California, I understand we've got plenty of floods and rain going on down there. And when we take a look at Florida, is things weird in Florida or what?
I really can't stay. I'm that old guy. But it's cold outside.
Yeah, it's cold outside in Florida. They're seeing some cold that they don't usually see. There were actually snow flurries. Yeah, snow flurries near Daytona Beach. Temperatures in Orlando, Florida, home of Disney World down there, dropped to 31 degrees, 1 degree below freezing in Orlando, Florida. And down in Miami, they managed to break 39. So, nice and warm in Miami. You know, folks down there, I have some friends and family that live down in Florida, and I know those folks, they get down to about 60 degrees, and that's wintertime for them. 60 degrees, it's time to break out the parka, which always makes me laugh as an Idaho kid. But, 31, 32 degrees. Now, the good news is the farmers down there say that the grapefruit and the citrus crops, the lemons and the oranges and all that good stuff should be okay. They can survive, a little bit of cold as long as it doesn't get into the 20s. So anything below 28 degrees is kind of bad for them. So they did manage to stay above 28. So we shouldn't see too much problem with the prices of that fresh produce. But and here's the other freaky story coming out of Florida. Not only do they have snow in Daytona Beach, they had a rain of iguanas. Yeah, they actually had iguanas that were, they get up in the trees there. And of course, they're cold-blooded animals. So when the temperature drops so low, their bodies just shut down. They just shut down and go into suspended animation and fall out of the trees. So can you imagine, just driving around or walking down the sidewalk and being pelted with, frozen iguana bodies falling on you from the trees. And then, of course, when they warm up a little bit later, they get out of that suspended animation and scurry off. So, wow, that's just the freakiest news story. I was checking out the weather here. Now, of course, there's people that are going to jump up and say global warming, climate change is the problem here. You can't really point to a single incident like this and say this is because of global warming or our global climate change. You can't point to just one instrument. But when we have these multiple incidents happening, over a series of time, that's where we point to the evidence of global climate change. These record heat waves that we've had and record amounts of rainfall and wildfires and so on. No one can deny that we're experiencing some severe climatary changes. Climatological, what's the word? Climatological? Somebody call me. Tell me the right word there. We're experiencing some severe climate change here on our planet, and we've got to do something about it. But as I said before the break, I told you I was going to come back and talk a little bit about Utah and what brings up Utah. Well, of course, we've got Mitt Romney running for president.
I believe in my Mormon faith, and I endeavor to live by it.
And of course, Romney belongs to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is headquartered in Salt Lake City, Utah. And of course, Utah is about 70-80% Mormon population. A lot of folks east of the Mississippi River really don't know a whole lot about the Mormons. And I remember when I was back in basic training in Fort Dix, New Jersey, I went to a Mormon ceremony out there on base, and nothing like what we would have out here out west. Almost like they just really didn't know how to put on the show. But out here, out west, especially where I'm from, Idaho, and then, of course, in Utah, is all about the Mormon religion down there. And one of the things that bothers me about it just strikes me as being too close to theocracy. I hesitate to ever want to get government involved or church involved in government. And the situation down in Utah, well, the reason I'm bringing up Utah, let's just get to the top here. The reason I'm bringing up Utah is because January 4th, yesterday, was the 112th birthday of the state of Utah. In January 4th, 1896 was when Utah became our 45th state. Now, some history about Utah so you can understand a little bit about how they came about to be a state. In 1833, their prophet, Joseph Smith, was still back east, and this was the first marriage of Joseph Smith back in 1833. And the Mormons believed in polygamy back in the 1800s. This was a direct line from God to their prophet, to Joseph Smith, who gave him the magic golden tablets and the magic stones to read the magic golden tablets. And the magic golden tablets, which nobody has ever seen since, other than Joseph Smith, and nobody has ever read with the magic stones except for Joseph Smith. Anyway, these magic tablets told him that polygamy is ordained by God, that without polygamy, you can't be exalted into heaven. Now, exalted, that's kind of their term for the highest level of recognition in heaven. Don't want to get into too much of a theological discussion, but Mormonism has these different levels of heaven, and you've got to be a polygamist, and according to their belief back then, you had to be a polygamist, and the more wives you had and the more children you had meant you were more favored in the eyes of God. Okay, so this is 1833. Joseph Smith's married, and he continues to have more and more marriages following his polygamist belief. Now, meanwhile, in 1854, as the Mormon religion is beginning to grow, in 1854, their Republican platform, the Republican Party platform, said that they were going to fight against the twin relics of barbarism, slavery and polygamy. So there was quite a backlash. Now, you got to remember, Republicans back then are what the Democratic Party is now, right? The Republican Party was the party of Lincoln, and they were the progressive party back then. So the Republican Party was fighting against the twin relics of barbarism, slavery and polygamy. So they're equating polygamy on the same reprehensible level as slavery. All right, so not exactly a popular stand in America. And so much so, and as this Mormon movement started to grow and more polygamists were becoming known, so much so that the Congress passed a law. In 1862, they passed the Merrill Anti-Bigamy Act. So a man could not have more than one wife. The Mormons ignored that. The Mormons ignored that, saying that this was the law of God, and that the law of God outranks the law of man. Right there is why I hate the idea of theocracy and too much mingling of church and state, is when anyone comes and tells me that their book, their little magic tablets, have more weight than the laws that are agreed upon by the people who are being governed. When some preacher wants to come and tell me his book has a law that's more important than the laws that we pass, that's where I have my problem with religion. So the Mormons ignored the Merrill Anti-Bigamy Act, and they were a territory. The Utah was still a territory, desperately wanting to get statehood for all the recognition, taxes, protection, economics, and so on. In 1879, the Supreme Court had a case, Reynolds versus United States, that said that religious beliefs are protected, but religious acts are not. A lot of the Mormons were trying to claim a First Amendment right to polygamy because it was their religion. You can believe in polygamy, you just can't practice it. And to continue on against this, the anti-polygamy laws, in 1882, the Edmunds Act was passed that disenfranchised polygamists and set prison terms for unlawful cohabitation. So now it's more than just displeasure with the idea. They're going to start taking away their rights to vote and participate in society, as well as being able to set them into jail. Now, at that time, 1882, the president of the Mormon Church back then was a man named John Taylor. Now, you got to understand, the Mormons believe that their president has a direct line to God, somewhat like the Pope is kind of a direct speaker for God. So John Taylor said that the Mormons will never give up polygamy because it's God's law, and that's the only way we can get to the highest level of heaven. In 1887, the Edmunds-Tucker Bill was passed. This is a bill that made the Mormon churches, have to surrender their property and temples to the federal government. So the vice is on here, the squeeze is on to the Mormons, and they're going to fight this, you know. And so the government is passing these laws, and their second in command here, George Q. Cannon, was another one of these people in the Mormon Church, a high-ranking leader of the Mormon Church, said, quote, "To comply with the request of our enemies would be to give up all hope of ever entering into the glory of God the Father and Jesus Christ the Son. So intently interwoven is this precious doctrine," polygamy, "with the exaltation of men and women in the great hereafter, that it cannot be given up without giving up at the same time all hope of immortal glory." End quote. So, the Mormons are sticking to the whole polygamy thing through the 1880s. 1890, when it turns out that there's no way they're going to become a state unless they give up polygamy. In 1890, the president of the church, at this point, Wilford Woodruff, received a revelation from God that said the Mormons no longer had to practice polygamy. Isn't that convenient? And then 1896, they get their statehood. So that's my little Utah story for you. Shows you just how God will intervene if you're having problems with your country, with your statehood. God will come down and give you a revelation and make it all better. You know, it's the perfect religion for Mitt Romney, being the flip-flopper that he is. I'm Russ Belville, host of the Russ Belville Show. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back after this break with our last segment. Stick around, and if you want to get your voice heard on the radio, 866-557-7377. We'll be right back.
This is the Russ Belville Show. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Hey, welcome back. 51 after the hour, and I just wanted to wrap up this little Mormon history lesson that we went over here regarding Utah. It's their 112th birthday as of yesterday, the 112th anniversary of the founding of the state of Utah. You got to remember, as far as Mormon history goes here, that Joseph Smith claimed that his whole religion was all about bringing back the way God's law, the way God wants things. And he said that that God told him polygamy was the way to go. And all throughout the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, and 1880s, every church president and major leader of the Mormon Church stood up and said that God wanted them to have polygamy. God said so. Then in 1890, when it was becoming clear that they were going to lose all their property, lose their right to vote, and basically be pariahs in the United States, their president had a revelation. And God said it was okay to give up polygamy. And he produced this document called the Manifesto that said that Mormons would renounce polygamy. And thanks to that manifesto, 6 years later, the territory of Utah was granted statehood on January 4th, 1896. But the manifesto was really just a lot of writing. A lot of Mormons didn't take it seriously. They were still getting into polygamous marriages. Oftentimes they would take them down to Mexico, perform the marriages there, or get out on the sea, in the Pacific Ocean into international waters and perform the marriages out there. So the rumors of polygamy kept going through the 1890s, and in 1904, 14 years after the manifesto of renouncing polygamy, their first senator, Apostle Reed Smoot, apostle, by the way, that's like the second level of the top-ranking people in the Mormon Church. Reed Smoot was elected to Senate, but he had to have special hearings by the Congress that wanted to investigate whether or not the Mormons were sincere about that manifesto to give up polygamy. And the hearings were so embarrassing. They uncovered so much of the Mormons still going to Mexico to get married and so on, to have the plural marriages, that Joseph F. Smith, one of the descendants of the original Joseph Smith, had to issue a second manifesto saying, no, really, we mean it. We're getting rid of polygamy. Since 1904, to be fair, the Mormon Church has excommunicated any polygamous Mormons they find. However, there is still a group called the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints Church. This is the FLDS, and they're kind of headquartered down there near the border of Utah and Arizona. And they're still practicing polygamy down there. And the Mormon Church there's lawyers, you see, these Mormon lawyers who represent these guys from the FLDS. And these Mormon lawyers still pay their 10% tithes to the Mormon Church, and the Mormon Church is more than willing to accept it. So it's a little bit of a wink, wink, nod, nod to polygamy here. Like, yes, we say that we're against it, but we'll be glad to take the money from the people who defend the polygamists. We got no problem with that. And when asked about this was an appearance that one of their senators back in 2003, just to say that this isn't a, just in the past, long time ago type of story. Recently, they've discovered a graveyard, a mass graveyard out in the Utah-Arizona border. They call it the canyon, out in the canyonlands out there. And they call this area Babyland because it's littered with the unmarked graves of babies. I'm not making that up. You can Google it. Go look it up. But this Babyland thing, and the Utah officials say, well, there's no crime in having an unmarked grave, and they're not investigating the deaths of these babies, presumably from these polygamist families. And when they were investigating this in 2003, Senator Orrin Hatch was down there in South Utah to make a statement. Now, of course, Orrin Hatch is also a member of the Mormon Church. And this is his quote regarding this. He says, quote, "I'm not here to justify polygamy. All I can say is I know people in Hilldale, one of the cities, who are polygamists who are very fine people. You come and show me evidence of children being abused there, and I'll get involved. Bring me the evidence. I personally don't believe in polygamy, but I'm not going to judge others who feel differently." Senator Orrin Hatch from 2003. So here's my point about all of this. Utah was only given statehood if it promised to eliminate polygamy in its state. It wasn't given to the Mormon Church to eliminate polygamy in the Mormon Church. It was given to the state of Utah. And if the state of Utah won't work harder to eliminate these fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, these polygamous cults in their southern border, then it's time to revoke Utah's statehood. We'll miss you, Utah. All right. Well, that's the Utah story. Now, one other story I wanted to get to here for the beginning of this new year. Whenever we round the corner of the year and we start a new year, there's all sorts of laws that go into effect all around the United States. And one of the laws has been the raise of our minimum wage. The federal minimum wage has gone up to $5.85, but there's a lot of states that have their own minimum wage. I'm in one of them. I'm in Oregon, which sets its own minimum wage, and this year we raised our minimum wage to $7.95 an hour, $7.95 an hour. But we are being beaten by our neighbor to the north. That's right. Washington State, the Evergreen State, has the best minimum wage, the highest minimum wage in the country. Their minimum wage has gone up now to $8.07 an hour. Now, this 807, the reason this happened is they passed an initiative, I-688, which pegged their minimum wage to annual increases in the consumer price index. So when inflation goes up, when the price of things goes up, the minimum wage goes up. And when this passed, or when this was being argued in the Pacific Northwest, all the business interests came out and said, oh, you can't do that. That'll hurt business. That'll hurt labor. That'll hurt the very people that you're trying to help. Well, let's take a look at the evidence. When we look at the border of Idaho, my former home state, with the borders of the borders of Oregon and Washington. In Idaho, there is a city called Payette. It's right on the border with a city called Ontario that's in Oregon. In Idaho, the minimum wage is $5.85. In Oregon, the minimum wage is $7.95. And yet both of those cities seem to have McDonald's that are pumping out dollar cheeseburgers, and they both seem to be doing business just fine. It doesn't seem like the minimum wage in Oregon is hurting the McDonald's in Oregon. Go up farther north to Washington, a couple of border towns there. We look at Pullman, Washington, and Moscow, Idaho. Minimum wage in Washington, $8. Minimum wage in Idaho, $5.85. Or Spokane, Washington, with Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. The difference in the minimum wage being $2.22 different. And yet all the fast food restaurants in both cities seem to be thriving, and the prices aren't any higher in one over the other. So I'm asking you, does it seem like the minimum wage is really hurt? It certainly hasn't. Raise the minimum wage for everyone. We need to get this up to $10 an hour. $5.85 is a good start. Let's keep going. Maybe we can get a Democratic majority and take care of that in 2008. I'm Russ Belville, host of the Russ Belville Show. Thanks for tuning in, and sorry about all the technical difficulties. We'll be back next week with a much better setup. Take care, everyone, and enjoy the games.